song. Hey, we really lost to gain from what you done. It's so silly, how come? Yeah. Hey guys, good night. Yeah, it's actually nighttime. I just got fed up of trying to navigate the daytime lights and I decided to just work with the lights at night, and it's actually a little better. I don't know, to me anyway. But we're gonna do a recap of the braids, yeah. We're gonna do a recap of the Great British Baking Show tonight. Yeah, I know it's been about a month since my first recap, which was Cake Week. They're up to week 7 now. The last week I kind of watched was Japanese week, and I say kind of watched because it was showing, but I was doing a million and one other things, so I don't know what happened. I don't even know who went home. I'll have to watch it again. But the good thing about my doing this review now and not so soon after it aired is basically you should have watched it by now if you're like a fan of the show. I hope. And so there's less likelihood of me being a complete spoiler. Yeah? So we're just gonna go over weeks 2 and 3, Biscuit Week and Bread Week, and right off the bat, I'm just gonna tell you who left us. Matt Bull left us in Biscuit Week and Rowan left us in Bread Week. No point in tippy-toeing around it because, like I said, it's been a minute. And if you watch the show, you probably already know that. Yeah, so let's get into it. So far, this season has been the least, well, maybe I shouldn't say that, but I feel like it's been the least eventful thus far. It's just kind of a nice, light, laid back watch. You know, there's nothing overly dramatic happening. Just nothing. I mean, maybe some people might look at that and think, "Oh, this is a boring season." I don't think so. I just feel like it's relatively speaking to some of the other seasons, less spicy. I don't maybe that sounds like it is boring, but no, it's still just a nice, pleasant watch. I don't know if that's what they were going for, but I just think, like I said in the first episode of my recap, that that's kind of what we're getting just because COVID, you know. But anyways, so for Biscuit Week, our signature challenge was Florentines. The bakers had to create 36 uniform in taste and shape Florentines. If you don't know what a Florentine is, I didn't, and I had to Google it. But a Florentine is basically something like, I don't want to say a cookie, more maybe what you might think of here as a cracker or a biscuit, but I don't know. Think a fruit laden cracker. That might not be right. But basically a Florentine is a bake made out of dried fruits and nuts, usually with some sugar or honey, and that is brought together, held together by some sort of fat like butter. From what I read, basically there are not many recipes that incorporate flour, and I don't remember particularly seeing any of the bakers use flour. So flour is not a huge, it's not something that Florentines require, it appears. I was trying to remember if I've ever had a Florentine, and I feel like I've had something probably close to a Florentine. Didn't know it was called that, or maybe it goes by other names. I don't know. But yeah, they had to create 36 Florentines that would be dipped in chocolate. They had to be thin and they had to have snap. And of course, they had to be delicious. But I feel like the snap was the really big thing that they were going for. And in that particular challenge, in terms of taste, Sura excelled. Peter excelled with his sticky toffee Florentines. And Lottie gave us the first handshake of the season for her quarantine Florentines for Nana and Papa. I think that's what they were called. And basically, Paul described them as the ideal Florentine. When you think of a Florentine, that's what you would expect to see. And they were perfect. So he couldn't really find anything to complain about. So she got the first handshake, and they looked like something you'd want to eat. I think for her Florentines, she incorporated some sour cherries, chocolate, but yeah, those were the favorites. I just remember that Rowan, he didn't get to finish his Florentines. He was doing Florentines that were inspired by his grandma, and I just remember them being very colorful. And whereas a lot of people went for a circular shaped Florentine, his were square. The judges said they tasted okay, but they were not finished. He had to do 36 of them. And you're going to find that for these 2 weeks, Biscuit and Bread Week, that was a common complaint about Rowan. He failed to finish many of his bakes to completion. And so he was asked by the judges to simplify things. Did he? No. Because I just kind of feel like Rowan is one of those people. He came, like everyone else, hoping to win. But above all, I think Rowan wanted to enjoy every step of the way of this competition. And it also kind of felt like, okay, if he set out to do a thing, whether or not in a particular way, whether or not it actually worked out, he was going to still try to set out to do that thing in that same way. Because no matter how many times he got that critique, he was even asked at one point, did you try this at home? Did you finish it? No. But he didn't make any changes to sort of compact things so that he could finish. Other faves for the challenge. The thing about the challenge, the signature challenge, however, was that either people got the flavors really on point, like their Florentines were delicious, but they lacked snap, like Suris lacked snap. Peter had that issue. I think Dave's lacked snap, no snap as well. Was it Mark? Mark, one of the Marks. I'd say the elder Mark. His were delicious. He had sour cherries, ginger, but no snap. Macbull ran into issues because he tried to pipe like a peacock feather on top of his Florentines, and they thought the peacock feather looked like a tennis racket. So that debut didn't come off very well. But yeah, it was either they got the issue. It was either they got the snap right or they got the flavor right, and Lottie managed to master those two and give us the first handshake of the season. So for the technical, basically Dave came first place, Rowan came last place, and Macbull, who I've already said left us this episode, he came surprisingly third place, which is weird. He placed so high in the technical and yet he still went home. One of the issues that he ran into with his Florentines, and one of the reasons his Florentines did not have snap, was that he chose to soak his mangoes. And so I guess maybe he soaked them for too long, or I'm not sure why, but of course, if you're going to take the dry fruit and soak it, that moisture has to go somewhere, and so it goes, I guess, back into the Florentine, and that contributed to the lack of snap. It's weird because he had that response from the judges, but Hermine, she also used mango in her Florentines, and they complained that the mango needed to be soaked and that it was too tough. But moving right along to the technical. So the technical for that week was they had to do 12 macaroons, coconut macaroons, 6 filled and drizzled with chocolate, and 6 with mango curd. And I think even those of us US side, we're familiar with coconut macaroons. And usually they are a little bit crunchy on the outside and nice and soft and somewhat gooey on the inside. They're sort of browned on the outside, and they're good. And I've never really had one with chocolate or mango curd, but it sounded nice. And so that was what they had to do for the technical. it's not very often you see someone who places that very high in the technical still leave. And I would say that did Macbull do terribly, you know, like did he do terribly in the signature and the showstopper? No. I just feel like at the end of the day in this particular episode someone has to go home, and it so happens that um when measured up next to everyone else, he happened to be the one to go. It could have equally been Rowan. I mean, Rowan, at the end of it, when they announced Macbull as the person leaving, Rowan looked shocked because he obviously thought that he was probably going to be the one to go, but he wasn't. The showstopper required them to do a table setting where they would basically mold biscuit dough. And so, yeah, my favorites for the showstopper were Lottie's Viking setting. I think she did an awesome job there. I also liked the younger Mark's set. What was it? An Ethiopian sort of, the coffee, the ceremonial coffee type setting. He did that, and he also, like Lottie, used charcoal to darken his biscuit dough. But the all-time fave was Dave. Dave made an absolute comeback from week one when his pineapple upside down cakes were splattered all over the floor. Like he came first in the technical, and okay, yeah, his Florentines didn't particularly have snap, but his table setting, man, it was gorgeous. Like you could not take a first look at that table setting and immediately just identify it as biscuit dough. He did an amazing job, like molding everything, and I guess he hand painted everything. It was beautiful. He did a really great job. Hermine's her setting was also, it was a Japanese tea, a Japanese tea setting. I love the colors that she used, the green that it was just very light. I don't know. I like saying that word light. I don't know, anything that's just light right now and just keeps you in that sort of airy space is all where I'm at. So I love the color that she used. I think the reason why, if we're going to talk about the reason why Macbull went home for Biscuit Week, I think it really came down to the judges feeling like he did not fulfill the mandate of the showstopper. Now, the mandate of the showstopper was basically you had to hand mold your biscuit dough into recognizable objects. And Macbull was really the only one who basically sort of he didn't hand mold. Everything that he presented was more or less flat. And I think that was the issue for them. And that's the reason why he went home. Maybe if he hadn't done that, it would have been more of an even shake between he and Rowan. Rowan did a lighthouse. Did he finish the lighthouse? Nah. But he almost finished the lighthouse, and he was quite happy. So at the end of the day, Macbull went home, and Dave emerged our star baker. So for bread week, the signature challenge was basically they had to do 2 soda breads, one savory, one sweet, with their own accompanying butter made from scratch. And then they had to do, for the technical, rainbow bagels, and for the showstopper they had to do a bread plaque, like a harvest plaque that depicted something that they were really grateful for. So for the soda breads, I'm just going to tell you, Hermine, she brought it. The judges kind of had an expectation of the types of ingredients that the bakers would bring to the soda breads, and they were really hoping for something that was unique, something that they never had before, and she brought that. For Hermine's savory bread, she decided to do salmon and cheese, and Paul said it was like having a whole sandwich. They loved it. They also loved her sweet soda bread, which basically she incorporated dry fruit that she had soaked in orange liqueur for about 3 weeks. So just think boozy, rum cakey soda bread. That's what she brought. And yeah, she earned that handshake. I feel like she is, I don't even want to say an underdog. I feel like you got to look out for her. They're all, they all have strengths, and it's only as the weeks go by when someone probably has like a bad week that you're going to see, um, okay, how people begin to fall off. But it's crazy because Biscuit Week was Dave's Star Baker Week. And they always talk about the curse of the Star Baker. Who knows if there's a curse, but we've always kind of found that the week following, Star Bakers don't always do that well. And you could probably put that off to many things, maybe a little bit of overconfidence. Maybe that just wasn't their week. But it could just also be, like I say, all the time, people have strengths and weaknesses in the kitchen, in baking, in anything. And maybe that week was their strong week, and maybe the following week was a week that had to do with aspects of baking that they're not particularly keen on. So this week, I feel like Dave just kind of moved back into middle of the road. You know, his soda breads, I think Paul said they lacked punch. He didn't incorporate enough of the ingredient to bring enough flavor. So what is a soda bread, by the way? So a soda bread, I guess they call it a soda bread because it incorporates most often baking soda. And the whole idea is that you want to be able to incorporate ingredients, but because it's baking soda, I mean, you have to be able to do that quickly, get it into the oven so that that leavening effect is there and it'll do what it has to do. If I think with Sura, she didn't have her temperature up high enough. So, even if she did get them into the oven fast enough, the temperature wasn't high enough to bring out that full leavening capability. So they didn't rise, they kind of just spread out, and they didn't get enough color in the oven, but they were delicious. She used za'atar in her savory, and the judges, they loved her flavors. Who else did really well? Well, let's talk about Rowan, because I think I mentioned that Rowan went home this week. For Rowan's soda breads, he did the savory was olives and sausages, and but the key one was the sweet soda bread. He decided he was going to incorporate polenta. For folks who don't know what polenta is, think cornmeal. And so if you know what cornmeal is like, it's very gritty. If you've had cornbread, texturally it has that kind of gritty, sandy sort of texture. Like even when I'm having cornbread or if I'm making it, I like to incorporate some other kind of flour to sort of temper that. But they asked him how much of this polenta are you going to add? And at the end of the day, when the soda bread came out, it was very nicely colored though. It was polenta and I think currants or raisins. And basically Paul said it was like having a lemon drizzle cake in a sandstorm. Ouch. 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 And on top of that, Rowan, he came last. If you remember in Biscuit Week, he came last in the technical, and he came last in the Rainbow Bagel technical this week as well. So not off to a good start, especially just kind of sliding by last week because Matt Bull failed to do what he was supposed to do in the showstopper. So not off to a good start. But yes, the soda breads, I think generally speaking, most people had soda breads that were okay, that tasted well, but the issue was more of bringing more ingredients for more of that kick. Yeah, Mark C, the elder Mark, he came second in the technical. As far as his soda breads went, he basically, like many of the other bakers, needed to add more of his ingredients, to give it that extra oomph, that extra kick. And he did really well with his bread plaque. Hermine, she attempted to do a brioche bread as part of her plaque, and Paul had huge doubts because brioche needs a lot more time than she was able to give it. She said she was going to put the dough, if I recall correctly, in the freezer to sort of hopefully speed things along. But as Paul said at the end of it, it's an enriched dough, but it's not brioche. Her focaccia, I hope I said that right. Don't kill me. That was really delicious according to Prue. And at the end of the day, Mark C, the elder Mark, he emerged star baker. And as I said before, Rowan went home. Mark C really deserved it. I feel like, his very first week, Cake Week, he himself probably, you could tell, I remember, I just have a vision of his face after the judges gave him some of the critique. And I don't even know that he probably thought maybe that he would get this far based off of that first week's performance, but he's really made a comeback in Biscuit Week. He did really well with his Florentines, and he's been getting really good critique and comments. And this week, it did not surprise me that he pulled off Star Baker. So my sister brought to me a conversation or just the topic of an article that she'd read where they were kind of saying basically that the show is doing less for showcasing British culture through baking, and more about like giving crazy tasks to bakers who aren't up to the task. And we had a whole discussion about that. And I don't know, I honestly don't know what the original intent of the show was in terms of whether they really hoped to showcase British culture through bakes. I don't know if that was their original intent, if that was one of the goals, so to speak. I know that in some of the seasons past, I remember specifically when they did some sort of sweat pudding or something like that. Sometimes they'll do a little aside where they'll incorporate stories or other folks who will tell you about the history of an ingredient or of a particular bake or whatever it is. And they'll give you some historical background. And I remember they did that for Sweat, S-U-E-T. And they've done it for a couple other bakes. I'm trying to remember. I can see it, but I can't remember what they called it. But it's not every season, and I haven't seen it done thus far this season. And so I guess maybe that was in the initial stages part of one of the aims and goals of the show, is to sort of educate people and incorporate and showcase British culture through food and baking, through baking. But I don't know if that's really I mean, it's a competition. And at the end of the day, yeah, I get it. Sometimes you look at some of the things that they ask the bakers to do, and it might seem like, wow, these are professional bakers. These are home bakers, most of them, or even home bakers who sort of aspire to the professional. You may have some home bakers who are selling at their church, or have a little more experience in terms of baking in bulk and things like that. But honestly speaking, I still think the competition is pretty fair because, to my understanding, the bakers, apart from the technicals, have an idea of some of the challenges they will be presented with for the signature and the showstopper. I'm sorry. So I think it doesn't make it easier, but I definitely think it gives them the opportunity to research if they're unfamiliar with a particular challenge that they're told they may have to face, and to practice to improve their skills or to perfect their skills. The fact that they have that ability beforehand to sort of, okay, let's say you're not great at doing chocolate cakes, and they say a chocolate cake is going to show up. We don't know, it's going to show up. And you're not that great, then you go and you figure out a basic chocolate cake recipe, and then you figure out how to amp that up, and then you practice it until you get to just where you think it's on point. So I think that takes away a little bit of that jumping through hoops type of aspect, apart from the technicals. And the technicals to me are just sort of that, when you have like that pop-up exam that you weren't expecting, and for that pop-up exam, you're basically just required to apply everything you know about baking and everything that you might have learned in terms of technique and ingredients, and see what you come up with. So what are your thoughts about the show's commentary on British baking culture? Do you think they could stand to do more? Or do you feel like that really isn't the aim of the show to begin with? Yeah, I know we're on to Japanese week and pastry week, but we're gonna catch up. Thanks for watching, guys. Till next time. See ya.